there seems to be some sentiment lately that young people are more disengaged in their broader communities these days. But after connecting with the three of you, we've had many opportunities now to connect, which has been awesome. It really proves that that sentiment simply is just not true. So your energy and your commitment for your communities speaks volumes in your work. And I'd love for our friends here at the summit to really learn a little bit more about the work that you all are doing. So we're going to start off by just getting a sense of what led you kind of into your path. Angelica, I'm going to start with you. You're a first-year student at Bentley University. You've already built an impressive resume as a youth leader. You're a team mentor with the Aspen Challenge, which you were actually part of a team who won the challenge. And you founded your own nonprofit organization just a couple years ago. So tell us a little bit about your nonprofit and how it really ties into how that's become a driving force between what you want to do with your community.
Okay, so hi everyone. So essentially our nonprofit is based off of bringing awareness to unhealthy relationships and providing the resources to the younger generation. And for us, the reason we chose that challenge, which made us lead into the nonprofit, was because being from a Title I school and being from a low-income, minority-based community, we in our everyday lives, we tend to see a lot of unhealthy relationships, whether we've experienced it or our families. So we just wanted people to know that that isn't normal, because most of the time we tend to normalize it, especially on TikTok. We are always like, oh, I'm so toxica, but that's not right. That's not the right way to go.
Right.
And we just want people to know that love doesn't have to hurt. And we're just here to provide that resource and help someone.
Love that. Well, so Andrew, as we talk about wanting to bring this kind of work out to the communities, that also means working with kind of like lead advisors and community leaders. So Andrew, you're a pretty seasoned public servant already. You're a senior youth advisor to the city of San Jose and a youth delegate to the National League of Cities. So what made you want to engage with your local government?
Yeah, so, in the 1930s, like many communities across the country, Eastside San Jose was faced with redlining and discriminatory policies. And as I dug deeper into my community's history, I found out that my community responded with the mantra "Sal si puede," which translates to "get out if you can," where the only way you as a young person would succeed is if you went out of your community and lived meaningful and productive lives. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what that created was a void in the leadership and the talent that's in our community. And thus it created an environment where young people were sort of left to fend for themselves. And that's a really hard place to be in. And that's a community thing that's really hard to tackle. So one of the first big decisions that I made going into high school was, I had the opportunity to take on a private high school education, but knowing part of this in middle school and knowing part of my community, I turned down that opportunity to go to the public high school in my neighborhood because that's where I was needed.
Yeah, so this idea of like community playing such a central role in what's kind of driven your direction forward, and then the need to be able to bring that community experience to the masses. So Emmie, you're a junior in high school, you're already an accomplished journalist. You won a number of awards. You've been published nationally and internationally, including the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, the Tennessean, and YR Media. So there's a common perception that young generations primarily get their news from platforms like TikTok rather than traditional media outlets, which have struggled to really connect with younger audiences. So in this changing news landscape, what actually sparked your interest in journalism and representing the community you're a part of?
Yeah, I've been writing for as long as I can remember. I was writing short stories and poetry when I was really young. And as I got older, I became interested in civics, and it was really only natural that I started, being a journalist. But there was this moment, I wrote an op-ed in the Tennessean, which is the branch of USA Today in Tennessee, where I live, on why it's important that people vote in the Nashville mayoral election. And people came up to me afterwards and said, "You're the reason I voted." And that was kind of like a brain-switching moment for me, because all of a sudden I was hearing that my voice mattered, that it made a change in the world. I can't vote. I'm 17, and at the time I was 15. But someone else voted because of me. And I think that that holds a lot of power. And I'm actually working with the Tennessean to create a class for students to learn how to write an op-ed. And then every student who participates will have the opportunity to publish in either the Tennessean or the Sun Post, which is an organization I work for.
That's amazing. So, yeah, right? Bring it. One thing that you three all have in common when we've been in just kind of discussion is, there's been spaces that have been made that have invited you in. There's been spaces where you just had to kind of work your way into it and make things happen. So as you think about how you forged these paths into these spaces, where your voices are now heard by positions of people that are in power. So I want to speak very specifically. So Angelina, the recent Common Sense poll on the state of young people says that families show that 67% of kids and teens rate the mental health of children in their communities as just fair or poor. And 54% believe that schools are doing just enough to support students with their mental health. So as someone who co-founded a nonprofit organization that's really focused on fostering healthier relationships, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these numbers. What do you think other adults, older adults and institutions are missing when it comes to understanding the mental health of our youth today?
What I feel like adults are missing is that just honestly the fact to listen, because most times we are always told that, oh, back when I was your age, I would be working, doing all this physical labor, but now due to social media and everything, our generation, I tend to notice, has more of a mental strain, and we honestly don't have the tools to make that up, to make us feel better, because they didn't go through it like we are now. So I feel like there's a bit of a disconnect there. So we just honestly have to find the resources and be more educated on that.
So in addition, resources, folks, it's one thing, it's providing you the resources to do this work. What's some of the stuff that you do within your nonprofit around this work then that you felt really makes the most impact in connecting with youth? Something that's in your day-to-day that it's this works well.
For us, we tend to do a lot of interactive workshops where we have, whether it be local office officials or therapists or social workers, come to the schools and talk to the students in more of a casual way, oh, you're talking to a friend, just tell me how you feel. But also one thing that we did put in is that the students would talk to other students, seniors talk to freshmen about what's going on, because they're at the end of their journey while freshmen are at the beginning. So it's like a little brother sister type of moment.
Developing approachable spaces that they can connect with each other and having it be youth to youth, but really supported by folks like us that can really enable you to do that work. Awesome. Andrew, you also work on the city's youth council, and you've represented San Jose's young people at one of the top national gatherings of city leaders, which already just reading that blows my mind. Can you give us an example of an issue that you raised or that you worked on where your voice as a young person brought something really important or unique to that conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a few years ago, San Jose created the Children and Youth Services Master Plan, and we're still in the development stages now, but we're phasing out phase one, and we're putting that into practice. And one of the things that guide the Children and Youth Services Master Plan was that it brought every sector together with this vision, that if a young person walks into a public library and that city librarian overhears that young person didn't have access to food resources, that young person faced food insecurity, that city librarian would be able to directly connect that young person with food access. And this goes for youth employment, healthcare, and those are just to name a few. So, when we were making this master plan, one of the perspectives that I offered was first through the observation of the classroom, where, junior year, as students were going into class for the first day, students would have first impressions of teachers. And sometimes, that teacher might be really strict. And that's the face value that, unfortunately, many peers in communities like mine stick to for the rest of the year. And when that strictness becomes something, far away that they can't engage with, that they don't feel like they belong, then it's something that they'll disengage with in terms of their education for that whole year in that classroom. So translating that experience into the city, one of the things that I had the opportunity to offer was, yes, our city was working with us to co-create resources and identify needs that were needed by young people. But the perspective that I offered was, how are young people perceiving these resources? Right? And that's a really important question because that's that initial phase of engagement.
Yeah. I want to get back to that, but before I do, Emmie, you've written for a number of established journalism outlets, and you've also been involved in the Sun Post, which stands for the Student Unified News Network Post, which curates and elevates the best student journalism from around the country. When you're writing on a certain issue, how do you think about elevating youth voice as a dimension of your story? And can you give us an example of something that you've done?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with a quick story. I'm sorry. I went to the Tennessee's Banned Books Day on the Hill a little while ago, and author Ann Patchett was speaking, and at the end she did a Q&A. And this kid, he was probably in middle school, he raises his hand and he goes, "How do you give voice to the voiceless?" And Ann Patchett says, "Well, who do you think is the voiceless?" And he gestures to himself and he goes, "Me." And she walks over to him and she hands him her microphone and she goes, "Well, what do you want to say?" And that was this like, whoa moment for me. And I know it's something I'm going to take with me for the rest of my life in the way that I interact with my peers and in the way I interact with students that I'm working with to help elevate their voices. It made me really think about this question, how do we elevate student voices? And I think what it comes down to is equipping and empowering them. You give them the toolbox, because you kind of have to be a good writer to write in established journalism outlets. And then the platform, you have to actually publish those voices. So the op-ed class is a great example of that, because we know students have things to say. I worked on an open letter last year that was published in the Tennessean, and we got over 100 signatures across the state in less than a week. Like, people agree, they care about things, and they want to make their voices known, but they don't always know how to. And that's why the Sun Student Unified News Network is so important, because they are mentoring students from across the country, and then they're publishing those voices, and then they're compensating those students. So instilling in students, your work is important, your voice is important, and we want to hear you. I think that's really important.
That's amazing. So elevating those voices, I think, so one thing that you mentioned, Andrew, is like, how do we actually get young folks to listen or hear that these things are out there? So I guess, as you all have gone into this work yourselves, if you can think about one thing that you wish you knew kind of as a youth navigating this space, that you would tell that youth out there right now, it's like, I didn't know this, but now I do. This is something you should think about if you want to get into policies, if you want to get into supporting like your community org or even early journalism, right? What's something that you wish you knew when you were younger that folks here could help support, spread that word?
Definitely, it's a learn as you go process, and that's for anything. And sometimes we get caught up in taking that first step, and we don't know where to go. The incredible thing is, if you're in the right environment, there are going to be adults that are going to be willing to help you and give that extra hand, and that shapes a person's life trajectory, right? Mm-hmm. That's incredible. So definitely that.
Angelina, how about yourself?
I would have to agree with that, honestly, to just go and do it, because you would be surprised by the amount of people that are willing to help, especially young people, because the fact that you took the initiative to make a change from what you've been seeing is amazing altogether.
Emmie, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I really couldn't agree more. Looking for ways that you can help yourself, writing on your own, and I think the biggest thing I can say is learning. Yeah. You got to read the news. You got to stay informed in order to be part of the news.
What do you recommend? This is kind of a curveball now. Like, you got to read the news. You got to follow the news. Like, how do young folks know where to find like news that they can trust? What do you guys do? What do you all do?
I am very big on, I think, media in this day and age. I think it's really hard to remove bias from media. So I think what it's mostly about is reading both sides. So I'm going to read Fox, I'm going to read One American News Network, but I'm also going to read CNN and AP News. And trying to find, the balance within those narratives is really important.
Yeah. Andrew, Angelina?
Yeah, so at this point, 20 million Americans, if the White House was to broadcast something on the news, it would reach about 20 million people on these big networks, and a lot of them, for better or for worse, are older people, and younger folks, tend to also get their news from social media. And we know how messy social media and the information there can be. So it's often with that in mind that it's organizations like Common Sense that help young people navigate the informational landscape that's out there, because it can get very complicated, it can get very overwhelming, there can be bias. So it's just looking for that right source.
Awesome. Angelina, yourself?
I agree with what Andrew said, because on my end, I am the person that is on TikTok, gets the information from TikTok. So I usually, once I see it, I tend to go look a little further, because I can't trust that one person.
Sure.
I like to get look at other avenues of oh, is this actually right?
Yeah.
Or should I trust this? And then make my own opinion.
Awesome. Well, being that this is a room of folks, for better or worse, that are older, your last thoughts. We are going to move into the rest of the summit after this last thought. I'm done talking, so I want your words to be the last thing we hear. We're going to start with Andrew, then Angelina, then Emmie. What's the one thing that you think everyone here should know, kind of coming into this summit, that you just want them to really think about as it comes to youth, our young adults on the stage that are going to be our future leaders? Yeah. What should they know?
You're doing it now, and you're here and you're educating yourselves, and you're going to bring it back to your communities, and that's a huge thing. I'd say, if you have a chance, mentorship can change a young person's life. And, if you're at a crossroads from where to start, I'd encourage you to look up here, because although we, may have a sense of what we want to do in the world and how we want to contribute, in the work that we do, there are often more questions than that there are answers. And going through and having a conversation to see your experiences and what you've learned, again, can change the trajectory of our professional and personal goals.
Awesome. Angelina?
I agree with that. If you have any resources, whether let's say a long lost friend that is working at a company a student wants to work at, just giving them that platform will change the trajectory of their life, especially I know my experience coming from Title I school, low income. For me, when I got the opportunity for Aspen Challenge, that changed my life. I'm here. So that, imagine what it could do for someone else.
Right on. Emmie?
Yeah, for me, the best thing I can say is giving students the toolbox that they need to really change the world. One of the issues that I had when I was first getting into journalism was I didn't know where to start. You have to look, and to look, you have to already be interested. So for teachers, that means putting those opportunities in front of students. For policymakers, that means implementing more abilities to write and more writing education curriculums. Because let me tell y'all, I tutor in my school's writing lab, and some of those college essays are rough. Rough. Commas, come on, please. And shameless plug here for donors in the crowd. There's so many incredible organizations I'd be happy to share with you that need the money, need the funding to get to those students. And because there's so much work being done and there's so much work to be done, but a lot of it takes money.
Well, thank you for your voice today. Thank you for your time and your leadership. Subscribe, follow, whatever it might be. Thank you all. After you. Oh.